my style there of the T-shirt, no socks, no belt, was a function of how hot it was in Miami. I mean, it wasn't really sort of thought out. It was just...
Picture this. Is 1985, and there is one face plastered on every magazine cover from New York to Tokyo. One man whose style choices, a linen blazer, a day's worth of stubble, loafers without a single sock in sight, triggered a fashion revolution that clothing stores across America were not prepared for. One actor whose television show was pulling in audiences so enormous that the numbers feel almost impossible to believe today. That man was Don Johnson. And if you've spent any time on the internet recently, you may have seen the headlines suggesting that the same man who conquered television, music, and film in the 80s somehow crashed and burned so completely that he lost absolutely everything. But here is the thing about those headlines. They are built on a foundation of half-truths, dramatic oversimplification, and the kind of storytelling that sacrifices accuracy for clicks. Don Johnson at 76 is alive, working, and by any reasonable measure, doing just fine. So today we are going to tell the real story, the whole story, about what actually happened to one of the most recognizable men of the 20th century. Before we can understand what happened to Don Johnson's money, we need to understand where Don Johnson came from. Because the story of how far he fell, or didn't fall, only makes sense when you understand how far he climbed, and how unlikely that climb was in the first place. Donald Wayne Johnson was born on December 15, 1949, in Flat Creek, Missouri, to teenage parents. His father, Wayne, worked as a farmer. His mother, Nell, was a beautician. The family eventually relocated to Wichita, Kansas, where young Don grew up, alongside 3 siblings. This was not a household of privilege or connections. There were no industry insiders making phone calls on his behalf, no famous relatives smoothing his path into show business. There was just a kid in the American Midwest who discovered early on that he had a powerful instinct for performance. He enrolled at Wichita South High School, performed in school productions including West Side Story, and developed enough of a passion for the craft that he pursued it seriously after graduation. He attended the University of Kansas before transferring to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, one of the more prestigious drama training institutions in the country. This was a deliberate, serious career choice, not some accident of circumstance. Johnson put in the work before anyone knew his name. His early career was the kind of grinding, unglamorous experience that most aspiring actors know well. Small film roles, television guest spots, near misses that did not quite land. He made his big screen debut in 1970, appeared in the cult science fiction film A Boy and His Dog in 1975, and picked up work wherever he could find it. In 1969, he won the lead role in a Los Angeles stage production of Fortune and Men's Eyes, a significant theatrical turn that began to generate attention. But consistent, career-defining success remained elusive for years. Then came 1984, and everything changed at once. Miami Vice debuted on NBC on September 16, 1984, and the television landscape was never quite the same afterward. The show was created by Anthony Yerkovich and developed under executive producer Michael Mann, and it arrived with a visual language that American television had genuinely never seen before. Cinematic camera work, contemporary pop and new wave music woven into every episode, as if the show were a music video with a police procedural attached. Neon-drenched nighttime Miami rendered in a way that felt more like a painting than a television set. And at the center of all of it, Don Johnson as Detective James Sonny Crockett. Crockett was magnetic in a way that is difficult to fully explain outside of the context of that particular cultural moment. He was brooding and unpredictable, simultaneously dangerous and elegant. He wore Armani the way other men wore denim. His stubble was not carelessness, it was a statement. His Ferrari was not a prop, it was a personality. Johnson inhabited the character so completely, so naturally, that the line between the actor and the role became genuinely blurry for many viewers. The numbers the show produced were staggering. At its peak, Miami Vice was drawing 40 million viewers per episode, a figure that sounds almost surreal by modern streaming-era standards. The show earned 15 Emmy nominations in 1985 alone. Don Johnson received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series, and in 1986, he won the Golden Globe for Best Performance by an Actor in a Television Series Drama. He was also honored with a People's Choice Award. Advertisers scrambled to be associated with him. Talk shows competed to book him. He was on the cover of everything. The fashion impact was immediate and total. Clothing stores across the United States reported sudden, inexplicable demand for linen blazers, pastel shirts, sockless loafers, and rolled-up sleeves. Men who had never given a second thought to what they wore were walking into stores and asking for the Sonny Crockett look. Johnson did not simply wear clothes. He became the reason an entire generation of men suddenly cared about clothes. The music industry noticed as well. Miami Vice was one of the earliest television shows to treat its soundtrack as a proper commercial product, placing Phil Collins, Glenn Frey, and Peter Gabriel throughout its episodes in ways that drove real record sales. Jan Hammer's synthesizer theme became a genuine hit single. The show functioned as a music delivery mechanism disguised as a crime drama, and it worked brilliantly. Johnson himself leveraged the moment into a music career of his own. His debut album, Heartbeat, was released in September 1986 on Epic Records. The title track reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the United States and climbed into the top 5 in the United Kingdom as well. The album was certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of America. A second album, Let It Roll, followed in 1989. Johnson was performing in arenas. He was, by any metric, everywhere at once. By the later seasons of Miami Vice, he had become one of the highest-paid actors on American television, earning a reported $150,000 per episode. For a man who had grown up on a farm in Missouri with no industry connections and spent years grinding through small roles and guest spots, this was an almost incomprehensible transformation. Miami Vice ended in 1989 after 5 seasons and 111 episodes, and Don Johnson stepped into the challenge that awaits every actor who plays an iconic character too well. The world refuses to see you as anyone else. He tried films. Dead Bang in 1989. The Hot Spot in 1990, directed by Dennis Hopper. Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man in 1991, a film that bombed at the time but has since developed a devoted cult following. Born Yesterday in 1993, opposite Melanie Griffith. Guilty as Sin in 1993. Tin Cup in 1996, opposite Kevin Costner, which showed he could hold his own comfortably in a major studio production. None of these films, however, established him as a reliable box office draw the way Miami Vice had made him a television institution. Hollywood could not quite figure out what to do with him outside of the world it already knew him from, and the industry has a long and well-documented history of failing actors in exactly this way. The transition problem that trapped Don Johnson is one that has claimed many television stars of his era. The medium that makes you famous also stamps you so thoroughly that escaping the stamp becomes nearly impossible. Wherever he went, Sonny Crockett followed. But then came a second act that most actors would have accepted with enormous gratitude. Nash Bridges premiered on CBS in 1996, with Don Johnson starring as San Francisco homicide Inspector Nash Bridges, a character as different from Sonny Crockett as the fog of the Bay Area is from the humidity of Miami. The show ran for 6 full seasons and 122 episodes, concluding in 2001. Johnson was also the show's executive producer, a behind-the-scenes role that gave him significant creative and financial stakes in production. During Nash Bridges, his salary reached approximately $150,000 per episode, comparable to what he had been earning at the height of Miami Vice. Nash Bridges was not the cultural earthquake that Miami Vice had been, but it was a solid, loyal, successful procedural that gave him a second decade of steady, respected television work. He received his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1996. By any conventional measure, his career had produced more success than the vast majority of his peers ever see. Now we arrive at the part of the story that the internet has gotten the most spectacularly wrong. So let us go through the actual documented facts carefully, because the gap between what happened and what gets described in certain corners of the internet is significant. In 2003, Los Angeles-based City National Bank filed a lawsuit against Johnson, claiming he owed approximately $930,000. A Los Angeles County judge ruled in the bank's favor. This was a real financial dispute with real legal consequences. By 2004, Johnson's companies filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, a legal mechanism designed to allow an entity to reorganize its debts while continuing to operate, rather than simply liquidating everything and walking away from obligations. The specific trigger for the bankruptcy filing was his 17-acre ranch near Aspen, Colorado, a property listed at the time for approximately $21 million. A bank was attempting to force an auction of the ranch to recover money Johnson owed. The bankruptcy filing put a legal hold on that process and bought him time to negotiate. Here is what is important to understand about Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It is not the same thing as being broke. is not the same thing as losing everything. Is a legal tool, one used regularly by wealthy individuals, major corporations, airlines, real estate developers, and retail chains. The word bankruptcy carries enormous emotional weight in everyday conversation, but the legal reality of Chapter 11 is far more strategic and far less catastrophic than the headlines suggest. By December 2004, all of Johnson's creditors had been paid in full. His attorney confirmed publicly that every debt listed in the bankruptcy filings had been settled. The ranch was saved. His company was emerging from bankruptcy protection. The grocery bill that became tabloid fodder, $5,740 owed to a local market, was paid. The hospital bill was paid. The liquor store was paid. Everything was paid. But the financial turbulence was not quite finished. In 2006, reports emerged that Johnson was struggling with a $10.6 million mortgage on the Aspen Ranch. In May 2008, he came within hours of losing 14 acres of the property to foreclosure, paying off $14.5 million in debt with just hours to spare before the auction was scheduled to begin. These were genuine financial pressures, real debt, real legal battles, real close calls. There's no honest way to minimize the difficulty of what he was navigating during that period. But here is what the clickbait version of this story always leaves out. While Don Johnson was managing these personal financial difficulties, he was simultaneously fighting one of the most significant profit participation legal battles in the history of American television. And he won. In 2010, Johnson filed a lawsuit against Risher Entertainment, the production company behind Nash Bridges. His claim was specific and documented. As co-developer and executive producer of Nash Bridges, he had obtained a 50% ownership stake in the copyright to the show if it ran beyond 66 episodes. It ran for 122 episodes. Under that agreement, he was entitled to half of the profits from syndication and all other revenue streams tied to the show. According to court filings, Nash Bridges had generated over $300 million in total revenue, with more than $150 million coming from syndication alone. Johnson's production company had received none of its 50% share. Risher's defense relied on the kind of financial accounting that has made Hollywood notorious for decades, a practice so well known in the industry that it has its own informal name, Hollywood accounting. Under this system, studios and production companies load expenses, overhead costs, marketing allocations, and other charges onto a project's ledger in ways that can make a commercially successful show appear, on paper, to have generated little to no profit. Winston Groom, who wrote the novel Forrest Gump, famously encountered a version of this when he claimed he received nothing from a film that grossed over $600 million at the worldwide box office. Art Buchwald fought a similar battle overcoming to America. The practice is well documented and widely despised. The jury in Johnson's case was not persuaded by the studio's accounting. In July 2010, they awarded Don Johnson $23.2 million in profits he was owed. The verdict was reported by the BBC and stands as one of the more significant profit participation decisions in television history. Let that number sit for a moment. $23.2 million. Awarded by a jury. To a man who, according to the thumbnail universe of YouTube videos and gossip sites, had supposedly lost everything and was living out some cautionary tale of Hollywood ruin. The real story is not a cautionary tale. It is the story of a man who faced genuine financial difficulty, managed it through legal channels, paid his debts, and simultaneously fought, and won, a major courtroom battle over money he had rightfully earned and been denied. An account of Don Johnson's life would be complete without acknowledging the personal side of his story, which has generated headlines with the same consistency and frequency as his professional life. His most famous relationship is with Melanie Griffith, an on-and-off romantic history that the tabloids have never fully let go of. The two first got together when Griffith was in her teens and Johnson was in his mid-20s, a dynamic that reads very differently through a contemporary lens than it may have at the time. They married briefly in 1976 when Griffith was 18, divorced, and then famously remarried in 1989 at the peak of Johnson's fame. During their second marriage, they had a daughter, Dakota Johnson, who would eventually become a major film star in her own right. They divorced for the second time in 1994. For years, Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith were among Hollywood's most discussed couples. They separated and reunited in cycles that kept gossip columns perpetually supplied with material. What makes their story ultimately somewhat unusual for the industry is that it did not end in a prolonged public war. Over time, both moved towards something more functional, co-parenting Dakota, occasionally speaking positively about each other in interviews, declining to write tell-all books or feed tabloid feuds. Given how dramatically things could have ended, is a relatively dignified conclusion to a complicated chapter. Dakota Johnson grew up to become one of the most recognizable actresses of her generation, rising to global prominence and building a career that in many ways has eclipsed even her father's extraordinary fame in certain demographics. The dynamic this created, where Don Johnson occasionally finds himself introduced as Dakota Johnson's father rather than the other way around, is something he has addressed publicly with good humor rather than resentment. By all accounts, he takes genuine, obvious pride in what she has accomplished. Johnson has been married 5 times in total. His marriages include Melanie Griffith twice, actress Patty D'Arbanville, with whom he has a son, Jesse, and socialite Kelly Flager, whom he married in 1999 and remains married to today. Together, Don and Kelly have 3 children, Atherton, Jasper, and Deacon. Their marriage has now lasted over 25 years, a duration that in Hollywood circles represents something genuinely rare and worth noting. Johnson has also been open over the years about his earlier struggles with substance use, addressing the topic in interviews rather than hiding it. He has credited sobriety and a more stable personal life as significant factors in his continued health and career longevity into his 70s. It is the kind of honesty that tends to be more useful to people than the polished alternative. So what does Don Johnson actually look like today? Not the version constructed from bankruptcy headlines and dramatic YouTube thumbnails. The real one. The answer, depending on what you were expecting, may surprise you. He is working, consistently, deliberately, choosing roles that have nothing to do with coasting on nostalgia. In 2012, he appeared in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained, a small but memorable role in one of the most culturally significant films of that year. In 2017, he played the menacing Warden Tuggs in S. Craig Zahler's Brawl in Cell Block 99, a performance that earned genuine critical attention and demonstrated he had no interest in playing it safe. In 2018, he appeared in Book Club opposite Diane Keaton and Jane Fonda. In 2019, he played Captain Massey in the Emmy-winning HBO limited series Watchmen, one of the most discussed television events of that year. Also in 2019, he appeared in Rian Johnson's Knives Out, the murder mystery ensemble that became one of the genuine cultural moments of the year, earning a 97% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and over $312 million at the worldwide box office. Johnson played Richard Drysdale in the film, a role that blended charm and dysfunction in ways that reminded audiences he still carries real, undeniable screen presence. He was not there as a tribute to his own legacy. He was there because he was good.